Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Season 4 of the Call It Anything podcast. First one here of the new year. I'm your host, Jack, joined by my guest,
Mr. Solis.
All right, so we are back, sir, but before we get into the business as usual, sir, how have you been?
I've been good, Jack. Happy 2024. The school semester is well and truly underway. We had a good visit from LAUSD. And today, after our podcast recording, I'm going to go on my 29th walk in 2024.
That's good to hear.
I'm not listening to new albums like you did last year. I'm just walking, but I'm walking for my health, all of the healths.
Yeah. Well, I always go with the classic line that an old teacher of mine that you obviously knew, Miss Shepard, told me when I was talking to her one time, and that is, any improvement is good improvement.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And speaking of, or while we're on the topic of that and walking, I believe this Friday is day 200 that I will reach. So 200 albums I will have listened to.
Wow.
Yeah, so that just goes to show.
Old.
Yeah, that just goes to show the consistency and willpower I've had. Because there have been days where I'm just like, I don't really want to do this, but I'm just like, well, you got to keep consistent, you know? And plus, the music does help sometimes. Because again, like how you were saying, sometimes you get to explore a lot of different music, a lot of different artists that you would have never found yourself listening to.
And as you may have noticed, Jack, on Instagram, I've made this moderately interesting for me because I've challenged myself to take one photo outside while I'm out there. And I've made the one rule that I can't post a photo from a previous day. Mm-hmm. It's got to be the day of the walk, I'm going to take this photo. And so I'm outside literally looking for the next photo I'm going to post, trying not to post too many palm trees, trying not to post anything twice, So I'm looking around.
That's good to hear. But as you mentioned, we've entered the new year, and that means wrestling. Well, I can't even say. Well, it's a fresh start for wrestling, but as we know, wrestling takes no days off, basically.
No, it is not. No, it does not. But we are well and truly on the road to WrestleMania. It's an exciting time of year.
Yeah, and the Rumble, as many people say, it's everyone's favorite time of year in WWE because, I mean, admittedly, the Rumble definitely has to be the one pay-per-view. I would say maybe even either on the same level or maybe even above WrestleMania, that everyone from casual fans to lapsed fans to people who don't even watch WWE anymore tune in for the Rumble.
I agree.
Yeah, it's always usually one of the biggest nights for WWE, and this one was a big night, and that was signified by the fact of there wasn't many matches. The main focus was the 2 Rumbles and 2 championship matches that we had on the night.
There are other championship matches that were had on Raw, which I think is interesting. I never noticed it before this weekend, but they've been doing this. There are matches that would have been on the card, perhaps, in a previous year or a previous regime, but they've definitely allocated some of that star power to the televised shows during the week.
Yeah, and, in some instances, it helps out because you'll probably see criticism that we've had during certain points, like throughout this podcast history of, complaining about show lengths, and thank goodness we started this podcast, during the pandemic times, because imagine doing recordings on these shows back when they used to be 5 hours long.
Goodness gracious!
Imagine having
when we were clamoring for two nights of WrestleMania.
Yeah, imagine having to do a podcast episode on WrestleMania 35, which was 6-7 hours in length. Oh man, but yeah, so it definitely is something that you see a lot of different opinions on in the wrestling community, because a lot of people enjoy it, but a lot of people also they look at it and go, well, why aren't these matches being featured on the pay-per-view where they can get more time, a bigger showcase,
Yeah.
And I understand it more for the Rumble because usually, 30 people, those, the Rumbles usually typically go about an hour each, so that already takes up 2 hours. And as we've seen lately, they really don't like to push past the 3 hour mark usually.
Yeah, which is funny since they're pushing 3 hours on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and they definitely are. And yet we've seen recently, it's like they kind of want to do that set. We start at 5, end by like 8:30 at the latest. Rarely do I see them push it to 9, except for like the big pay-per-views like SummerSlam or Mania.
Yes.
But so yeah, definitely a smaller card. But you mentioned the changes of regime that we've seen over this time, and it makes sense given Triple H and NXT always did the the more focused, shorter cards of like 5-6 matches at most.
Yep.
But so getting into it, and of course with the shortened time, the shortened matches, we can have more time to get into these rumbles. We start off with the women's rumble.
30 women over the top Royal Rumble to declare a number one contender for one of the women's championships, for there are two.
Yeah. Sir, I can't remember if we did predictions beforehand, but going into this, who were you thinking was going to win and who were you rooting for?
Per the request of one of my teachers, there's about 4 or 5 of them that watch wrestling. And one of them said, Mr. Sleaze, we should compile our predictions on somewhere for fun. We weren't going to bet at all. And so I made a spreadsheet. People filled in who they thought, what was their number 1 pick, 2, and 3. My number 1 was Bayley. But I thought, if it wasn't going to be Bayley, my number 2 pick was Nia Jax. And then we also threw in a guess for who we thought a surprise entrant was going to be. Just one. Who'd you think was going to show up, right? And my surprise guest was Naomi. I was like, having just been to Vegas and saw the TNA show, I thought, no, Naomi is showing up tonight. Who'd you think was going to win going into the evening?
I think in the back of my mind, I had Bayley as the pick, because I had like a couple of different options in the back of my mind. Like I was thinking, they seem to be doing this storyline with either Nia or Becky, but I kind of ruled out Becky because I'm like, she already won it, and it's not that you can't rule out previous winners, but like it just feels like there's a different route that they could go rather than just having her win the Rumble,
Agreed.
And it kind of felt like the same thing for Nia as well to me. Like I was like, although I had Nia a bit higher than Becky just because I was like, Nia's never won it. They've been doing a lot with her since her return. I could see it happening, but the story that Bayley has is what pushed me to believe they were going with her.
And I got to try my best to describe Bayley's story to my dad because I was watching this with my dad. And, it's funny to see him process, like, things like Bayley's story, right? Explaining to him what damage control is.
Yeah, Ricardo and I had a similar experience with the 2 friends that were watching along with us. And it was also fun to, like, explain, different things, like, who certain wrestlers were, having to sort of explain to them the hierarchy of, like, this person's a star, this person's, like, middle of the pack, and it was funny because, Ricardo was trying to use, like, different terminology for them to understand, so he was like, these people are sort of filler in the Rumble right now. Like they're not really here to do much except get eliminated, basically.
Oh my! We'll get into that. How do you want to cover this, Jack?
I always forget how we do it each year, but I think we usually just talk about the big spots, the big main participants. Because it's very difficult, especially to keep track of. Well, it's easy to say who came in at what position. But it's always difficult to remember when they got eliminated and by who sometimes.
Right. Wikipedia actually has an incredible table I have up that lets you sort. That's listed in order of appearance. but it also has their brand, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, who they were eliminated by, how long they were in the ring, and how many eliminations they have. But I like your call to just call out the big moments.
Yeah, and starting off, we got a big moment right away as at number 2, you called it, sir. Naomi makes her return in the Rumble at the number 2 spot.
And I love it at being at number 2 because there's no one in the ring but Natalya, and she gets all the time in the world to their song to play, for the glow stuff to be right. Like, she wasn't rushed to the ring for the action's sake. She got that ability to like soak it all in. People chanting "Welcome back" at her. It was incredible.
Yeah, it was real fun. And it's cool to see her back, especially, after doing, some time away in TNA, doing some good work there. At number 3, Bayley comes in, and it was funny because after seeing the segment on SmackDown, Ricardo and I were trying to guess, what number could Bayley have gotten. I don't know if you caught it, sir, but she looked very unhappy with the number she drew. And
her appearance here affirms that it was definitely an early entry, right?
Yeah, I told Ricardo, I was like, it has to be any number between 1 and 5, definitely.
Nice. That's
so
funny.
Yeah, she comes in at number 3, and then our next surprise comes in at number 5 as Jordynne Grace from TNA makes her entrance.
That got a huge reaction out of me, Jack, especially since I just seen her beat Naomi in Las Vegas twice. Once for Hard to Kill and once for, I think, an Impact recording. They gave us 2 matches as if, Naomi was like calling a rematch right away.
But yeah, very surprising. Was very, caught off guard by this, One of the things I've been glad that I've been doing when it comes to Rumble time is avoiding any spoilers from, the dirt sheets, as they call them.
Jack, my phone was completely off. It was incredible. I'm going to do it again.
Yeah, so that was pretty fun. After that, what we get next is most of Damage Control coming in. Asuka came in, Kairi Sane came in. At number 10, Bianca Belair came in, and I found it odd because in that same clip where Bayley drew her number, I don't know if maybe I misread it, but it seemed like Bianca was very happy with her number. So when she came in at 10, I told my friends and Ricardo, I was like, that seems like an odd number to be happy about getting, like you're still in that very first third of the Rumble. That doesn't seem like something you would want to be happy about.
And for a 1-hour Rumble, she was in there for 47 minutes. So no, Jack, she didn't save herself. Like, she saved herself 13 minutes.
Yeah. And then after that, we had Kaden Carter and Katana Chance were also in there, and I bring them up because we get that spot where Kairi tried so desperately to hang on.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so funny having to explain to our friends whether we thought that was intentional or if that was, a botch or not.
I think, yeah, so to pontificate with you, I think it was intentional, but it didn't go according to plan. I think she was supposed to catch herself. I think they were supposed to pull her up, but Asuka couldn't pull her up on her own. I don't know if somebody else wasn't there or they just took for granted how heavy she is from that position, but yeah, it didn't work out.
Yeah, because you see Asuka trying her hardest to lift her up too, and it was just like, oh man. And props to Asuka for being the veteran to call the audible there.
And when Asuka gets eliminated, she's holding somebody from one side where it looks like there should be 2 people holding her. And Asuka gets eliminated. I think Kairi's supposed to have gotten eliminated right away at that moment, but she fell before it happened.
Yeah, and then the one thing I like about this spot, though, is even if it got messed up, not only did they find a way to recover in the Rumble, but it allows for it to be added to the future story, which, don't want to spoil too much, but it can add to that future story of, Damage Control getting angry at Bayley, being like, well, why didn't you help the 2 of them, in the Rumble, Because you do see Bayley talking to them about, what do we do about the plan?
right? I was telling you, I was trying to explain to my dad what damage control is. As soon as Kairi Sane and Oscar are out there, I explained to them who they are, and he looks at the three of them and goes, well, like referring to Bailey. Well, she doesn't fit in with them, that's for sure. So I go, there's some tension. He goes, I get it.
Oh, man. After that, gotta mention that Chelsea Green and Piper Niven come in because they have a whole mini story throughout this Rumble, and that is Piper constantly accidentally attacking Chelsea because she ends up getting caught in the corner, or like someone moves Chelsea into the way of the attack.
Some of them were really funny. Some of them were like just kind of funny, but they were all funny.
Yeah.
Some of them were a little more cringe, right? But like there was an instance, I forget who like falls on top of her. I think it was Nia, right? Just gets knocked out and she falls back. Like that one was really good. The one of the corner spots, there were too many. They were really good. But I was a big fan, Jack.
Yeah, and it was fun to see what it's always fun to see with people who don't watch, to see what connects with them and all that. And it was just fun to see, a good reaction from our friends to those little bits, and it was funny to see like the sympathy build as time went on, where they were just like, leave her alone at this point, I have to say, while looking at this spreadsheet from Wikipedia, the biggest thing that shocks me is Nia Jax. She came in at number 19, spent 20 minutes in there, and had 8 eliminations.
Just like you were telling your friend, some of them were fodder. Some of them were out there just to get chucked by Nia Jax. And I thought, Jack, oh man, made me feel good about my second pick. If it's not Bailey, Nia's out there looking like a beast, looking like she could main event a WrestleMania, looking like she could challenge one of them women's champions, right?
Yeah, definitely. Trying to remember more spots that come from this. Obviously, we have Becky Lynch who came in as well. I will say at times I was kind of confused because of the themes. Like I didn't recognize some of the themes given their nature. But another funny moment that happens is at number 24 where Valhalla comes in. And It's already funny to start off because Michael Cole is making a big deal about her having the horns or the antlers on. And I guess maybe it's something that's happened on the weekly shows. But I was very confused. I was like, why is Michael Cole going so hard for the headgear?
Something we definitely missed on SmackDown or Raw.
Yeah, but as she's making her entrance, R-Truth's music hits. And we see him run down looking very confused at Valhalla, but he runs down, makes his way into the ring, and then is very much confused to see the women are in the ring.
Yeah. Nia Jax chucks him out, right? Because she's Nia Jax, but Adam Pearce by now has caught up to him at the ringside going, Truth, you're on later. This isn't your Rumble.
Yeah, and then in the very background, as they're talking, you see Valhalla get eliminated immediately.
So I was talking about this with a fellow teacher, and I said that the spot would have even been better if she weren't allowed in because R-Truth took her spot. Like, you remember Tess beating somebody up and taking a spot? You know what I mean? Like, it should have counted. It should have said, Valhalla, he entered the ring. You're not allowed in anymore.
Yeah, oh man. But yeah, that was a funny spot. Got a good reaction out of my friends. And then we reached a point where we got basically, if you want to say like surprise back to back to back to back, because we saw 2 NXT talents come in. The first was Roxanne Perez, and then later on Tiffany Stratton.
Oh, goodness gracious, Jack. For somebody who doesn't watch NXT, I was very impressed with Tiffany Stratton. And I'll just say the thing, Jack. I mean, anybody who does an Alabama slam like that, I'm like, I'm missing something.
Yeah, and then at number 28, we saw a lot of her, when she first made the jump over. But finally making an in-ring appearance, Jade Cargill.
I very much so love the reaction she got from the um, Orlando faithful.
Yeah, got a big reaction. And then at number 30, everyone was wondering, who's it going to be? Is it going to be some return? Is it going to be a big surprise? Is it going to be Money?
Ah!
But it is a return. Liv Morgan, finally making a return from injury, I believe, makes her return at the number 30 spot. And instantly made me think, I'm like, well, they do have some built-in stories, for, like, especially, like, on the side of Rhea Ripley. It's like they could have something there, so that just adds to the field.
Yeah, and I was pretty surprised. Then I kind of caught myself wrongfully surprised at how strong she actually looked. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I think Michael Cole reminds me, somebody at that commentary booth reminds me that she was the last to be eliminated last year by Rhea Ripley. So I go, well, golly, Liv Morgan just might be a force to be reckoned with. Who knew?
Yeah, and speaking real quickly, because I forgot to mention it, but with Jade Cargill coming in, we see her have that face-off with Nia Jax and even eliminate her.
Handily. She lifted Nia Jax twice and hoisted her over the top rope, which made all that work they did with Nia worth it. You know what I mean? She chucked 8 people out. Who's going to stop her? Jade Cargill's going to stop her.
Yeah. And then I really like the way they approached the sort of final 5-4 competitors, with Bianca. It was Bianca, Liv, Tiffany Stratton, Jade Cargill, Bayley. I think Becky goes out right before Bianca, so like they did a good job of like really having a really stacked playing field towards the end.
Agreed. Tiffany Stratton doing a very Tiffany Stratton thing. And my mom had passed by and asked, does anyone ever pull that one with the braids hair? And I go, yes, and it's a real dastardly thing to do. So where's Tiffany Stratton trying to keep herself from being eliminated? By hanging on Bianca's hair.
Yeah. And I just really liked the way they did like that ending. And it was funny because when we get to that final 3, because that was the thing that surprised me the most, was they didn't do the classic, face-off of the final 4 people, each person in a corner, It's like...
Yeah.
Bianca gets eliminated, and then I think Tiffany gets eliminated. They both get eliminated by Bayley, and so it leaves just the final 3,
It's Bayley, Jade, and Liv, right?
Yeah, and very much while watching it, it wasn't until like the very end where they were doing all those spots on the end where I told Ricardo, I'm like, very eerily similar to last year's Rumble with Asuka, Rhea, and Liv.
Liv, yes. On the edge, everyone's over the top rope, so we're all like dancing on this tightrope, right?
Yeah. And then I really liked the way they did those final sort of spots where, Liv gets Jade eliminated, and they don't even give you room to breathe because in comes Bayley to get Liv out, before she can even get back in, and Bayley wins the Rumble.
Liv eliminated Jade from the apron with an Oblivion, and like I was like, is she gonna eliminate herself with her move where she's falling backwards, right? It looked really, really good. And again, from here I'm thinking, who's Liv? Like, where did this come from? How is she so OP? She eliminated Jade Cargill, who hoisted Nia Jax like she was a sack of Idaho potatoes, with this giant move from the apron.
Yeah. Really like the way they handled this one, One of the biggest talking points after the night with Ricardo and our friends of ours was that we just really felt like the Women's Rumble was done really good as far as, like, pacing and as far as, like, the playing field where, you had your star power there. You had a lot of stars in there, One thing we forgot to mention is Jordynne Grace and Bianca Belair facing off, and, Bianca doing the KOD to eliminate Jordynne Grace.
On the apron, yes.
Yeah.
Jordynne Grace also got a cool spot where her and Ivy Nile had 2 different women in standing suplexes, and you're like, there's like a lot of fun spots,
Yeah, Naomi stayed in there for a whole hour from the number 2 spot, It's like they booked a lot of people strong, and as we mentioned sort of throughout, we didn't mention it as much, but even with the sort of filler characters like, Chelsea Green and Piper Niven, they still gave them stuff to work with during the Rumble so that their time mattered,
I agree.
It got you invested in them. It got you to be interested. So it wasn't just, this person comes in, does something, and then gets thrown out right away. They gave it time to breathe, and they did a lot of different stories throughout.
I 100% agree with you, Jack. And I saw on Instagram somebody took a screenshot of Bayley pointing to the sign, and what the commenter noted was that there are so many people in the audience behind her also pointing at the sign.
Yeah, and I will say, the craziest thing to come out of all of this, if you've listened to this podcast long enough, you know that when it comes to my dad and I, we're not really fans of really any of the horsewomen, which I know to a lot of people is a surprise to hear after Mercedes Moné was above Kenny Omega on my top 10 list, but we're not really the biggest fans of any of the horsewomen, we kind of are more tolerable of some of them more than others, but you hear it throughout all the Charlotte jokes and all that we're not really the biggest fans. But yet going into this Rumble and going out of this Rumble, my dad and I were not only happy to see Bayley win, but we're so invested in the story that Damage Control has been telling that we very much want them to main event night one.
Woo! Woo! Oh my! With a stacked men's main event scene where I will stand with you, sir, and I shall say this could be that. This can totally fill that role.
Yeah, I look back to last year where the excuse was, or I won't say it's an excuse because it was true. The tag titles had an overarching story to them, that was very important and was very much deserving of a main event role, especially for tag team wrestling that usually never main events. It's it was cool to see it, and it's with this year, I feel the same way where I'm the story should take over anything else, and there hasn't been a better story going on right now for the most part. Now, obviously, the Cody Rhodes stuff we'll get into later, but for the most part, aside from that stuff, there hasn't really been a better story being evolved throughout the year than Damage Control, with their story with Bayley, and it's been so good that people are just waiting for that inevitable moment where they turn on Bayley, to the point where it hasn't happened, and yet people are already sympathizing with Bayley and getting ready to back her as a huge babyface,
I hear you, Jack. I hear you. Is there a story better written than that one being told with Damage Control? I would argue that maybe there's one, and that story is going to end on WrestleMania 40 in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's why I said we'll get to that later. It has to. It has to. That's all I'll say now. But yeah, that's how I feel about this, and like I said, that just goes to show the amazing work that, despite the fact that since Damage Control's inception, we've seen them pretty much have done nothing but lose big match after big match, pretty much, with the only big thing coming from EO winning the title, but it's we've seen them take so many losses, and that's something I saw a lot of people mention was Bayley herself has taken so many losses. She's helped put over a ton of people. She helped got Bianca over, in time for her to become the star that she's become on the main roster, She's helped out in all sorts of different stories. Should reward Damage Control with a big time match like this, So, very interesting stuff. Was very good Rumble, I'll say.
Agreed.
Moving on throughout the night, though, we move on to our next match, which was our first championship match of the night. And that was, of course, Roman Reigns defending his his undisputed Universal Championship against AJ Styles, LA Knight, and Randy Orton in a fatal 4-way.
Did you know, Jack, that Roman Reigns is the youngest man involved in this match?
I did not know that, but looking at the names, I'm not surprised hearing that now.
It was just an interesting collection of characters, right? There was something I wanted to say, too, about how everyone is this just WWE guy, right? Except, half of them spent quite a amount of time outside of WWE. I don't know. There was something about the 4 men involved. I don't know. It was just something about it. What'd you think of the match, Jack?
Well, like most Roman matches, I was kind of bored of it at times, but you know, I was getting interested in a lot of the work they were doing. You know, especially like the hot start that they had. But something felt off about it to me, and I don't know what it really was. And I think a part of it was just kind of that like inevitable feeling. You know, like I think that's what contributed to it. And it's funny looking here on Wikipedia that it says it went 19 and a half minutes, almost 20, when to me, watching it, it didn't feel that way in like a bad way, you know, where it just felt like, you know, it didn't feel like it was 20 minutes, but it also just didn't feel like a whole lot was happening, you know?
And like it's wild because this is a match where Roman doesn't have to get pinned to lose, right? But they don't play into that because it's not going to happen because of the inevitability you described. Really, though, Randy could have, like, for weeks gone, hey, I don't have to pin you at all. I can pin one of those other guys. But it's never brought up, you know. Everyone gets, I think, literally everyone gets a near fall off their finisher that's intercepted somehow. The most frustrating, of course, being Solo Sikoa pulling the referee out of the ring with a hood on his sweater. What are you hiding for? We were all waiting for you.
Yeah, I saw
your vehicle takes the hood off. Yeah, you think?
Yeah, I saw. I don't know.
Castle.
I don't know if you saw, but one of the tweets that came out during the match was someone going, "Why does Solo Sikoa always come off a hoodie on? We know it's you." But I think that's my biggest gripe with this match is they didn't, like you kind of mentioned the absence of it, they didn't play into the fear of like Roman losing the title without being pinned. Like they maybe did it once or twice, but like they didn't add that sort of urgency feeling to it, you know? That you get with like an elimination chamber or any other multi-man match like the ladder match, for example, you know, it's like you didn't get that sense of urgency from Roman of like any of these three guys could, you know, walk away as champion without me being involved.
Yeah.
And it's weird because during the build, it seemed like they were putting a lot of like hype into all three men, and yet it kind of fell flat. Like when the ending happened, everyone that was watching with us just kind of went, "That's it," you know, like that's how this ends. Like it really left a bad taste in everyone's mouth, pretty much.
You know what was weird too? Like, so after the 19-minute match, right? Roman is selling it like, you know, he just crossed the Atlantic Ocean by himself, right? By like with just, you know, under his own power. And Paul Heyman's crouched next to him, like relieved that they escaped again, right? But like, really, did you even break a sweat? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely wasn't too happy with this one, but it's okay. The solution should be happening come April.
I'm just saying.
But before we get into that, we have our final championship match and our final non-Rumble match. We have United States champion Logan Paul defending the title against Kevin Owens.
Mm-hmm.
And so going into this match, they were having some type of tournament on SmackDown, I believe. I don't know. I wasn't too tuned in for most of it. But during that time, I guess, KO fractured something in his hand, I believe is what they said.
His foot.
It was his foot. I thought it was the hand because he had the cast.
Oh, in story, you're right.
Yeah, in storyline.
Yeah, I think he's actually in there with like a fractured foot too.
Yeah, I saw that too, where he said like he felt he could barely walk in this match.
Dang.
Yeah.
He could have fooled me.
Yeah. So going into it, you know, the story is he had a cast, and they didn't want him using it, you know, because they played into this story where Logan Paul, being, you know, the influencer that he is like, hey, I could sue you for this. It's not like we're in a wrestling ring fighting. I could sue you for this, you know? And so KO has to fight this match without the cast. And KO's whole thing is, you know, well, doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to keep me down for 3 or be able to knock me out, you know?
Yeah.
And this story is all the more funny because it's like, KO could have easily been like, well, if you sue me for that, I'll counter sue you for the medal or whatever you have in your hand. But so yeah, that's the whole story of this match. As far as the match goes, what did you think, sir?
Not to get too involved in the finish, right? But it was, I think you can call it a Logan Paul match, right? You know, he definitely gets thrown around. Kevin Owens, right, definitely gives it to him.
Yeah, it definitely felt, not to be too harsh, but it felt, fairly average for the most part. Had a decent pace to it all. It had, your moments of like, is KO gonna do it? Is that the finish for Logan Paul? Like when he hit KO and KO kicked out at 2.
Oh yes,
And I think the funny statement that Ricky made was they like you hear commentary going like, oh, no one's ever kicked out of that or whatever, right? And Ricky said something along the lines of, oh wow, if only I cared.
Oh yeah, I mean that's where we are, right? Like the Universal Heavyweight Championship. Did any of us really think KO stood a chance here with WrestleMania on the horizon? And you're like, it's hard to like look past like, no, they're gonna want Logan Paul on the WrestleMania card.
Yeah, I think that's always the most difficult thing about the road to WrestleMania is like Rumble feels like that sort of last stop for like some type of change before but and also at the same time it also feels like anything that happens from Rumble to Mania, you're not going to see any like title changes for the most part. Like things are pretty set in stone from Rumble and on. So it's like you're rarely going to see title change, even some of the mid card or tag ones. Because it feels like they have stuff set for Rumble or for Mania already.
So wouldn't it be great if like we've seen in the past Rumble matches be for a spot in the Rumble, like they can be blow-off matches to stories that don't involve titles. And like, I think there's a little more engagement there. I think there's a little more variability there.
Yeah.
But does he do it? Does KO take the belt?
Well, first off, we see Logan Paul's posse or whatever they're called show up trying to hand him the brass knucks. And of course, the ref sees them and they're trying to get him out. But they find a way to slip him. Except Kevin Owens gets his hands on him, after avoiding it. He gets it. He knocks out Logan Paul with him. He goes for the pin. 1, 2. Why are we stopping?
What do we stop for?
Well, apparently, the ref sees the brass knucks on Kevin Owens' hands and goes to disqualify him.
He's the smartest referee, Jack, in wrestling history.
Yeah, not only that, but it was just so funny where it was just like my dad and I were talking about it, and I'm like, this is why the WWE doesn't have like an actual like rule book, Like they have a loose rule book so that they can just change it on the fly for instances like this, because it's always been to like the ref's discretion, but like how many times have we seen someone get caught in the ring holding a weapon and they don't get disqualified for it? Like the ref questions them if they used it, but then the ref just takes it, throws it out, and that usually leads to something happening behind his back. It's like the ref rarely ever does stuff like this, and like you could go the case of like, well, how does he know KO used it? He could have punched him with his left hand, or whatever hand he was using, or other hand he was using.
It is consistent with sort of the age-old adage of unless you're a face, right? Yeah. Think about hot tags, right? Or like it's so funny, like when you see it, you don't see it a lot, but I've seen it recently. I think it was Judgment Day, but like you ever seen them pretend like they tagged? They just sort of clap their hands, like, simulate the sound, and the referee turns around. He asks, "Hey, did you tag?" And that's enough for him. But if it's the face, he pushes him back in the corner. Get back over there until I see you tag. Literally in the same match. Yeah. There's some consistency to be said. And I think it's like, to make things even more complicated, right? Kevin Owens is really established as like a very smart wrestler in the sense that he's aware of the tropes around him. So I don't know how to feel about him falling for such an easy trope.
Oh, man. Yeah, and especially because a lot of people were just like, oh, no, actually, it was the best point that I saw brought up from my dad. And this goes back to the whole thing of like consistency and continuity.
Yeah.
how many times has Kevin Owens been both the face and heel? You know, like how many times has he been each role? Having been heel so many times and for a long time in his career, don't you think he would know better to throw the brass knucks away? Like that just adds to the age-old thing of, well, it seems like once you become a good guy, you lose all the sense and knowledge you have in the world.
I would love it if he came out on Monday. I didn't watch Monday, but it would have been incredible if he thought, they never see the knucks. I didn't think he was going to see the knucks. They never see the knucks. If he was just counting on the referee being inept.
Yeah, but that was the funniest thing I saw my dad bring up was just going, you would think the guy who's been heel for a majority of his career would have thought, known better to throw the knucks away.
That's so funny. That's so funny.
But
how much time we have this episode?
4 minutes.
Oof, and we've got a men's Royal Rumble match to fit in 4 minutes. Let's try. Just kidding.
Yeah, obviously, going to a part 2 where we're obviously going to talk about the men's Rumble and, of course, the potential road to WrestleMania as always. But
thank you all. Speed bumps along the way.
Yeah, but thank you all for joining for this episode. Tune into part 2.